Kingdom of Men, Chapter 13, Queen. The Extellin castle was carved into sea cliffs. It was cold, and the stone was black and tended to sweat and grow mold. The throne chair was constructed of the same cliffside stone. To ward off the cold, it was draped with layers of thick fur, making it more comfortable and warmer. Prince Nicolot felt pampered and rugged at the same time while sitting upon it. His father had bestowed the Extellin kingdom, the crown that had belonged to the now dead King Sarzo, and part of the army upon him. "You'll rule Exteli only as an extension of the Bellarone kingdom," his father had told him, before heading back to Bellarone. "Do not think this makes you king of this land, son, though you will face many challenges bringing the people here around to our control and leadership. You may be rewarded with sovereignty of this land once your brother is on the Bellarone throne. I will be watching what you do here very closely." The words had angered Nicolot, but he'd bitten back his anger and bowed to his father. Once gone, there was nothing to stop Nick from ruling this land as his own kingdom, regardless of names or titles. He was a king. His father had returned for Bellarone 2 days prior, and now a messenger had come from the soldiers who had been leading him home. The messenger was thin, tall, with extraordinarily long legs, making him impressively fast. His profession as a messenger was well chosen. The man's head was bowed slightly while he conveyed his message, as if to give Nicolot some semblance of privacy, to hide an emotional response. "Your Majesty," he started, "I bring news from Bellarone Kingdom." "Out with it," Nick snapped. "On the road, we received word that your brother, Prince Bilex, had been killed in the throne room by a mysterious weapon. The king was distraught and took off with a small squadron, not waiting for the entire legion. When we caught up to them, they had been attacked and killed on the road. We do not know if it was Lusitania or Exteli." "Wait." Nicolot sat up straight and looked the messenger in the eye. He wanted to make sure this wasn't some kind of trap. "My brother and father are dead?" "Yes, your Majesty." "And my sister?" "She still sits on the throne at Bellarone, surrounded by Lucidanian army camps." "You may go." "Yes, your Majesty." His father was dead? His brother, the next in line for the Bellarone throne, was dead. "How do you like that?" he said to the empty room. He stood up and yelled, his voice echoing off the cavernous walls. "How do you like that, father? The youngest son is the only one left standing. Your useless heir will now rule Bellarone and Exteli. Maybe you should have spent a little more time on this contingency plan," he said, pounding his chest. "Now what, King Nicolot?" he quietly asked himself. He sat back on the throne, slouching into a comfortable position. His father was gone. Even when planning to have Bilex killed, he never wanted any harm to come to his father. Even if his father had lived forever, he would have rather his father given him the kingdom than take it from him. Sure, Arazus had spent more time with Bilex, but he was still a great man. He was a respectable man, Nicolot thought fondly. He took a deep breath and looked around him. The throne room was less than half the size of the Bellarone throne room. It was dark, and though he wasn't necessarily opposed to the melancholic atmosphere, he much rather preferred the idea of being in Bellarone. He had a couple options. He could stay in Exteli, fight the people who would oppose his rule, and try to turn the rock into an orchard. Or he could take his men and return home. There would be restabilization to be done in Bellarone, but at least they already had orchards. He stood up from the throne and stretched, feeling the cold stone permeate his boots from the floor. Yes, he thought, I can leave this place behind. He headed out to find General Array, who had stayed behind with a captain and some men, and he gave the orders to pack up and leave this land to the thieves. The land would fall to anarchy, but at least it would no longer be a threat. King Sarzo had no heir, and most of his men had fled. The Lycedanian camps are growing, Princess Amira, Captain Davin said. They were in the throne room that morning after breakfast. Many days had passed since Amira had first spoken to the Lycedanian general. No one had noticed that Clegg Trapper had escaped, since everyone had been more preoccupied with the Lycedanian presence. Our armies are less than a day out, but some remained in Exteli to help your brother transition to leadership there. Once they have returned, we will still not be at full strength. We are recruiting and training more soldiers from the closest villages. My father will be home soon, and he can deal with the Lycedanian general, Amira said, looking relieved. Hilip shifted on his feet and looked away toward the windows. Kalia knew something was wrong. Unfortunately, Your Highness, we just received word that your father will not be returning to Bellarone Kingdom. He received word of Prince Bilux's death, then took off from the rest of the Legion, with only a small troop to protect him. They were attacked on the roads back, and everyone, including the king, was killed. I am sorry to be the one to bring you this news. He did look genuinely sorry, hanging his head and bowing before her. Amira stood up. No, she whispered. She looked at Hilip, then to Kalia, who had put her hand over her mouth in shock. No! Her knees buckled beneath her, and Kalia moved quickly to catch the small girl in her arms. Captain David immediately ordered the guards, soldiers, and servants away. Princess Amira's cries reverberated throughout the grand room, and he gave the girls a gentle look before closing the doors behind him. Kalia led the princess back to her room, tucked her into bed, and watched her cry herself to sleep. Her mind whirled in confusion and loss. She wanted to empathize with Amira over the loss of her father, trying to connect it to her own loss of discovering that the man who raised her wasn't her father. She knew the king loved Amira, and for that, she felt a small bit of jealousy. But she hadn't seen him dote on her much and wondered about her pain. Would Kalia feel the same pain if she lost the man who raised her? Kalia shook the thoughts away. More importantly, what would they do now? A king and a prince dead, a prince alive in a distant kingdom, Lysodania on their fields, and a princess on the throne. It was all overwhelming, all too much, and for a moment she wished she had gone with Clegg back to the mountains beyond Arion. Oh, what peace she could have found there. But then, who would have been here to catch the princess, to hold her when she cried, and to tuck her safely into her warm bed? Maybe this is where I'm supposed to be right now, she told herself. She stood up and went out into the hallway, nodding at the guards at the princess's door. She was grateful that at least she didn't have to stay by Amira's side while the guards were there. Kalia wanted to speak to Hilip, but she needed to track him down first. She heard men yelling and followed the voices to the war room. Not pausing to knock, she walked into the room. Men were standing over a long table covered in maps. They stopped talking and looked at her. Captain Davin said in greeting. Captain, is there a plan? The men in the room turned their eyes to Hilip, confusion evident on their faces as to why a girl was in the room and a part of this conversation at all. Hilip didn't appear to be fazed by their expressions. We have a few, depending on what we are faced with, he responded. Right now, we are determining the best routes of escape for the princess, should the castle be taken by Lysodania. You would, of course, be in the company of the princess during such an escape. That seemed to put the rest of the men at ease, as if they realized, of course, she could be part of the plan since she would be protecting the princess throughout the course of an escape. Kalia held back the urge to roll her eyes at the men. Have you heard word from Prince Nicolot and General Array? She asked. Again, the eyes in the room darted around nervously. Yes, favor Kalia, we have. The prince is coming back to claim the throne. The escape plan would only be put into action if he is killed en route or attacked by Lysodania once he arrives. Kalia furrowed her brow in confusion. But he just won Exteli at the cost of lives, including his father's life. He is just going to abandon that kingdom? Who will rule over Exteli then? We do not know, Hilip replied. Some men will remain behind to try and hold it in the name of Bellarone, but those men may not live very long if there's a rebellion, or if some distant relative of the dead King Sarzo stands up to claim the throne. The decision is not ours, but Prince Nicolot's at this point. We must wait for his direction. But King Arazus left specific instructions for Prince Nicolot to rule Exteli and Prince Bilex to rule Bellarone. Kalia placed her palms on the table. With both the king and Prince Bilex dead, it seems to me that the next in line for Bellarone Kingdom is Princess Amira. The men gasped and took steps back. A princess has never ruled a kingdom, Hilip said. It wasn't meant to be insulting or derogatory, just a fact. Kalia scoffed. If we only did things that were done before, then men would have never walked upright or ruled anything. Swords never would have been wielded. Castles never would have been built. There is a first for everything. I am a perfect example of that fact. Kalia turned on her heel and went back to Amira's room. She was ready to support the princess now more than ever, and was prepared to advise her. This was no longer about survival. Kalia knew she was the only person on the planet who could turn Amira into what she was really meant to be, a queen. When Amira awoke an hour later, rested but emotionally wary, Kalia was there with a hot cup of peppermint tea and a plan. Who do you want to be when you grow up, Princess Amira? The princess held the cup of tea, warming her hands, and took a slow sip. Her eyes were red and puffy. Tissues were wadded up beside her, and streaks of dried tears lined her cheeks. You can run off into the woods and hide. You can let your brother become king and send you off to marry a stranger in the village. Or you can stand up proudly and take the throne for yourself as queen. I can't do that, Amira whispered, not looking up from her tea. You can't be queen? Why not? My father had 2 sons. One of them will be king. One of them was always meant to be king. What if Nicolot is killed? Kalia asked. The words caught in her throat. She still missed him, and the thought of him sent mixed feelings throughout her mind and body. She shook the feelings away, telling herself that she only missed the idea of him. Then I will have to be queen, but they will make me marry a man in the village first, someone from a favor family. He will be the new king. Who will make you? My Oh, Princess Amira had almost said her father. She lowered her head a little more toward her teacup. Fresh tears began rolling down her face. The generals, the men in the favor families, they will all want me to marry so that my husband can lead the kingdom. If there were no men, no generals, no one to tell you what to do, what decision would you make for yourself? Kalia leaned in closer and pushed the teacup down so that Amira had to look up and meet her eyes. Nicolot is still alive, Amira said in a higher pitch, looking as if she were being pushed into a corner. Yes, but if you were the only one giving orders, what would you allow yourself to be? There was an uncomfortably long silence. My mother was a very beautiful, brilliant woman. The nurses told me stories of how defiant and proud she was. They told me that I look like her, with my inquisitive eyes and light hair. They told me that she was a strong queen and that people listened to her. I want to be like her. Kalia smiled proudly. She knew that this was a hard day for the small princess. She knew that the princess had experienced many hard days, and that many more were waiting in front of her, especially if she made this decision. But Kalia believed that this girl could do the hard things and get through the tough days. Then be like her, Princess Amira. Be the Queen of Belleroon. An hour later, the nurses had bathed the princess and helped her into the finest dress from their collection. She looked like a bride in a heavily adorned white gown with long, flowing sleeves that matched her long, light blonde hair. She had a small amount of powder on her face and a soft, glossy sheen on her lips. She looked more regal than Kalia had ever seen her look before. Kalia dressed up her tunic with a wuvat scaled vest, black pants, and laced up boots. She strapped on her sword and hid her dagger in her boots, knowing that she must be fully on guard going forward. Anything could happen at this point. The guards escorted the princess and her bodyguard to the throne room, where Amira climbed up on the throne and summoned Captain Davin. When he entered the room, he paused, as if he could feel the change in the air, before approaching and bowing to Amira. "Princess Amira," he began, "I have some good news on this day of mourning. Your brother, Prince Nicolot, is returning from Exteli to claim the throne. Lusitania will surely back down their threats and leave the lands. You no longer need to worry about fleeing." "I was never going to flee, Captain Davin," Amira said strongly. "This is not a day of mourning. This is a day of celebration because I am committing my life to my kingdom. I will not leave this throne for my brother or for a husband. I will be the Queen of Belleroon." He was silent and looked between Amira and Kalia as if waiting for someone to smile or laugh. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, Prince Nicolot is coming to claim the throne for himself." "Well, he cannot have it. My father gave him Exteli Kingdom to rule. It is his sworn duty to continue ruling that kingdom. This one is mine." Again, Hilip said nothing, clearly trying to piece everything together. "What is your plan if the prince attempts to claim this throne? To claim Belleroon Kingdom as his?" "We shall address the Belleroon people," she answered simply. "Send word that both myself and Nicolot will address the people from the four-building balcony in the keep at sunset. We will lay forth the decisions that my father made and the reasons each of us wish to rule Belleroon. Then we shall let the people decide." "Princess, that has never been done before. If Nicolot returns with general array and an army, there is not much we can do to stop him from taking the throne." "The soldiers who support Prince Nicolot's claim may return with him to Exteli, including General Array. You will be my new general. If they support Nick, then they wage war against me, their princess and the rightful heir."
"Princess," Hilip sighed, concern creasing his forehead, "there has never been a ruling queen. The people will not choose a woman, a girl, over a young man to rule Belleroon. I am afraid of what might happen to you. I'm afraid for your safety should your brother turn against you in anger after the people choose him."
"Then I must ensure that they choose me, dear general." She smiled warmly, and Kalia sensed a new calm confidence emanating from the young girl. "Now go, send word to my people to gather below the balcony this evening to honor their new queen." Kalia watched the fields beyond the castle from Queen Amira's room. It took time for Nicolot and the men to make it to the castle. They set up camp just outside, putting their legion back together and on display for the Lycidanian army to see. Kalia was surprised the Lycidanian troops were still there, further out, but camped as if they had no plans to leave. She assumed they had heard word of Amira's claim and were staying to step in to claim Belleroon themselves if the two siblings destroyed one another. Bellerone's civilians from the city and farms were also beginning to gather outside the castle walls. Guards at the gates were letting small clusters in at a time, verifying their identities first. Nicolot stayed out among his men and sent no word to either Kalia or Amira. Kalia's nerves were on edge, and her stomach muscles were so tight that she hadn't been able to eat anything all afternoon. She had expected Nick to storm through the gates and head for the throne as soon as he had arrived, but that hadn't happened, and the anticipation was driving her crazy. Her mind kept playing out possible scenarios, trying to be prepared to protect the princess in each one. Kalia assumed that the kingdom would overwhelmingly prefer Nicolot to be the leader. Having a king was all they had ever known. The princess was young and looked too beautiful and physically weak to fulfill their historic vision of a leader. She had little hope that the people would see the strength in her that Kalia saw. The girl was feisty, independent, with real love in her heart. She could grow into a powerful woman. With Kalia's guidance, she could become an unshakable leader. But for now, the people would only see a pretty little girl standing up against a regal prince. Once they chose Nicolot, she envisioned herself taking the princess back to her room and keeping her under guard until she was given to some favor to marry. Perhaps if Nicolot were to die. No, she shook her head. I cannot think of that. We have one chance for Amira to sway her people to her, and if that fails, that's it. We live out the plan that King Erasus set out for us. Maybe someday, when the princess is married, she can slip out into the night and disappear into the woods forever. Kalia would still have her escape plan and take the chance to live her life on her own eventually. Or what if Nicolot wanted to keep Kalia for himself, marry her, and make her the queen? She tried to imagine that plan, but for some reason, she saw Hillip's face instead of Nick's. She sighed and dismissed the thought of either man. No, this is my place, beside my princess, my friend, my sister. This isn't about me anymore. She and the princess ate an early, small dinner in the princess's chambers. The sun was at its lowest point in the sky. Denlerac was covered in shadow, but looming as a constant reminder to Kalia that something bigger than all of them existed just out of reach. Are you ready, Queen Amira? Yes. The guards at her door escorted them to the front of the castle and out through two glass doors onto an expansive balcony. She walked to the edge, her white dress looking golden in the light of the setting sun, and she raised her hands to cheers from the people gathered below. Kalia was amazed by the size of the crowd, the curious onlookers who came ready to choose a future leader. She did not know what Amira could say that would possibly sway all these people away from their tradition, away from what they had always known. She had never heard much about the time when there was a queen, even one married to the king. The king had always ruled, even with a wife at his side. Her own presence as a warrior and a bodyguard was odd and unwelcome, but at this point, neither one of them had anything left to lose. Kalia followed the princess onto the balcony and saw General Hilip Davin first, standing straight and proud in his stirk white uniform. She went to stand beside him. On the opposite side stood Prince Nicolot and General Array, the black man's muscles bulging in his sleeveless tunic. He was the most foreboding and intimidating person on the balcony. He had always been kind to her, but something had shifted. He seemed to be on alert. Everyone was dressed in their finest, but Kalia wanted to look like a warrior today, a fighter, not a handmaiden. She wore wrist guards, black boots, and had her sword at her side. Amira took a step back from the balcony's edge to address Nicolot. "It is good to see you safe, brother," she said. "You as well," he replied.
It seems that the stress of the past few weeks has aged you almost beyond recognition. I understand that you were the one wanting to address our people.
Yes, however, since you have returned, perhaps you should speak to our people first, she said.
It would be my pleasure, Prince Nicolot said, accepting the challenge. He was not dressed as impressively as she was, but he still looked regal in a dark blue robe over light gray pants. Kalia couldn't see a sword, but assumed he was armed beneath the robe. Nicolot walked out to the edge of the balcony to raucous applause. He raised his arms to silence everyone and then spoke loud and slow. Kalia stepped into the background. She couldn't see the people below him, but the planet of Denlarak was dark in the sky beyond, reminding her again of the danger lurking there. People of Bellarone Kingdom, I know that everyone must be feeling as sad as I to learn that we have lost King Oresus Bellarone and my dear brother Prince Bilex. But upon this dark hour of mourning I bring news that Kingdom Exteli no longer poses a threat. The crowd erupted at that news, and Nicolot waited for the noise to die down before continuing. As such, I am poised to take the throne of Bellarone Kingdom. Again, he had to pause for cheers. I ask that you let the representatives from Lysodania in our midst leave in peace, returning to their land. I am sure they arrived here only out of concern for the people. The crowd did not cheer, knowing full well the threat Lysodania had come to impose upon them. My sister, Princess Amira Bellarone, also wishes to address you all. She has faced many challenges since the death of our father and has borne them well. I appreciate her dedication and support of this kingdom. Princess Amira, would you like to speak? Amira stepped forward, and Nicolot stood aside, slinking closer to Kalia. She felt awkward with Nicolot on one side and Hilip on the other. The two did not acknowledge one another, as they may have done in the past. She wondered where Hilip's allegiances were. Would he protect the princess's claim to the throne, or would he bow to Nicolot? Princess Amira looked out over the faces of the people, her white dress and blonde hair moving only slightly in a light breeze. She looked them over slowly, as if making eye contact with each person in the crowd. The world was silent.
Dearest friends, only just a few days ago, I was asked to surrender the kingdom to Lysodania.
A collective gasp rose from the crowd. She paused to let the sound die back down.
My father and brother had been murdered. Prince Nicolot was in another kingdom with over half our legion, and his plans to return to us were as yet unknown. You may look upon me and see a child, a girl, and yet I have protected this kingdom. I did not flee when Lysodania came, and I did not turn over my kingdom or my people to them.
Amira began increasing the volume and intensity in her voice.
Prince Nicolot has taken and will lead the people of Exteli. It was my father's order that Prince Nicolot rule Exteli. I will not turn over my kingdom or my people to him if you do not wish it. I am as strong in heart, mind, and soul as any man. My brother will tell you that it is his birthright to rule Bellarone, but it is my right to make sure that you are completely protected and that my father's wishes are honored.
Kalia could feel tension building around her on the large balcony, as if the space were getting smaller. Stop this, Prince Nicolot said sternly, stepping forward. What are you doing, sister? He asked.
You said that I may speak. I am the one who wished to address the people, to let them have a voice. Let me have mine.
A slow murmur began to build. The people were mumbling together, raising their voices together, saying, "Let her speak." Nicolot pushed aside his robe and put his hand on his sword, his knuckles turning white there.
Separate voices, the voices of dragon spirits long dead, began speaking in Kalia's mind, chanting out in unison with the human voices to let her speak. "People of Bellerone," Nicolot said, raising his voice, "our father, your king, declared his heir to be king. I am the heir, the next in line, and it is my birthright. The Bellerone people have no right to choose their leader. I am not here to defend my right to the throne. I'm here to take it." Suddenly, a sword appeared at Nicolot's throat. Kalia was shocked to see that it was her own. She had reacted without thinking, worried for Amira's safety. Before she knew it, General Array's sword was in line with her heart, and General Davin had pulled his own on General Array. Everyone was at a standoff. "Let her finish," Kalia said. Nicolot's lip lifted in a smirk, and he took one step back, but no one lowered any swords. Amira walked closer to the edge of the balcony, extending her arms out once again. "I will not demand that you appoint me as your queen. I will not buy my place with promises. I only ask you to bestow upon me your faith as your now and future queen." Then she bowed her head to the people, who grew silent. Nicolot's eyes suddenly grew wide in shock. Kalia turned her head from Nick to see what he was gawking at. Floating behind and slightly above Princess Amira was a large dragon with emerald scales and silver wings. Kalia looked back at Nicolot and then turned to each of the men surrounding them on the balcony. They had all lowered their weapons and stood back, gaping in amazement at the dragon spirit. Kalia lowered her own sword, realizing that everyone else could see it too. This wasn't a dream. It was the same dragon she had seen in the woods, the dragon that had changed her life forever. "No, this is not happening," Nicolot yelled. He lifted his sword again and ran past Kalia, shoving her aside before she could lift her sword back up. She started to lose her balance, but managed to kick her foot out in time to trip Nicolot, sending him off his aim at the last moment. Hilip swiftly pulled Amira away from the edge of the balcony. Nicolot jumped up and Kalia met his sword with hers. He fought her fiercely as he yelled, the phantom dragon still floating there above the balcony. "This is my kingdom. You are all superstitious cowards. He is nothing but a ghost, a shadow of the past. This doesn't mean anything. I am your king. There is no voice to be heard, no decision to be made, and no dragon spirit to scare you all into submission. This is my kingdom." He was yelling loudly enough for Kalia, for the generals, for Amira, and for the people below to hear him. Kalia kept fending off his blows, but he was strong and directing all his anger at her. He is afraid, hurt, and doesn't want to lose, she thought, not wanting to injure him, but not wanting to be killed either. She was beginning to be afraid of where this fight was leading. He had her pushed back now to the edge of the balcony. One well-placed jab and she could fall to the crowd below. This man was one she had kissed. She had wanted to be with him always, to be his queen, and now he looked at her as nothing more than someone standing in his way. The hate stabbed at her heart, but she still couldn't bring herself to kill him. She knew that one of them would have to die to end the fight. A breeze blew across her hot cheeks, and she dared a glance back at the phantom dragon, still floating in the center of the balcony. It had begun flapping its wings and had a look of protection in its eyes. Why would it want to protect me? Kalia wondered. Why was it even here? She heard more growls and whispers, but she couldn't tell if they were in her mind or if others were hearing them as well. The dragon suddenly took in a deep breath that seemed to suck the air from Kalia's lungs. It exhaled a plume of blue flames that engulfed Nicolot. His eyes went wide and he screamed, dropping the sword. Within a blink of time, he was gone, leaving nothing but the sound of his sword clanking against the ground. The dragon dissipated into smoke, as if it had never been there. No, Kalia said, dropping to her knees. Tears began to flood her eyes, falling down her face. Nicolot? She couldn't understand why her heart cried out in pain and loss for the man who had just been trying to kill her. She had loved him once, even if it hadn't been real or true. She had fought for him once, and now he was gone. She touched the stone balcony. There was no heat and no ashes from the blue fire. She ran her hands frantically across the stone as if she could conjure him back. Amira and Hilip grabbed her arms and lifted her, pulling her away. As they carried her from the balcony, she could make out the chants from the people below. Long live the Queen, they said. Kalia stared out of her window and up at Denlerac, hanging in the afternoon sky. She had not left her chamber in days, choosing to mourn the loss of Nicolot in her solitude. She was happy for Queen Amira and knew that General Davin and his captains were helping her acclimate to her new role. With Nicolot gone, General Array had agreed to go back to Exteli under the control of Bellerogne. Word had spread throughout the land that a dragon spirit had ordained the new queen, and she was like a goddess. No one would dare touch her or speak ill of her. Amira was safer now than she had ever been, since everyone feared her dragon protector. The Lysodanian king had sent livestock and jewelry as gifts to the new queen, with his loyalty, respect, and unwritten apologies. Kalia felt nearly useless now, so she didn't feel any guilt about hiding in her room. Even Hilip had left her alone, too busy setting up a new normal within the kingdom. She knew that it wasn't Amira's fault that Nicolot was dead, but Kalia had nowhere else to direct her anger. Me. Kalia heard the whispered voice in her head at the same time she saw the emerald dragon appear outside in the courtyard. Who are you? Kalia asked through the glass window. She assumed that the telepathic dragon would have no problem hearing her at a normal volume. My name is Anissa La'alani. I am the dragon that separated the mother planet into the two sister planets, Naldash and Denlerac. Clackire? The magical dragon? That is the name the humans gave me. I am the same. What do you want from me, Anissa La'alani? Why are you so involved in all of this? You already know. Your destiny is to finish the war and reunite the sister worlds. You must go to Denlerac. You must stop your true father. What if I refuse? Then the Denlerac ruler, your true father, will come and enslave the people of Naldash. The lands will deteriorate. Both planets and every living thing on them will eventually die. I don't care. You will. Kalia considered these words. She looked away from the dragon spirit and up into the sky again. This is crazy. It is crazy that I am even talking to you. Nicolot was gone. The man who raised her was gone. Amira was the new queen and would be protected by the legion she now commanded. Exteli and Lysodania would no longer threaten Bellerogne, at least not for a while. Her real father, and maybe information about her mother, were on Denlerac. Going to another planet seemed as unbelievable as talking to a phantom dragon. How would I even get there? She asked. I can send you. Of course, Kalia thought. A magical dragon can divide planets, put words into my head, kill with a breath, and transport me to another planet. She rolled her eyes to herself. It wasn't as if she had anything to do or anything left to lose. She packed a small bag with supplies and a change of clothing, dressing in basic, unadorned threads, and then armed herself with daggers and her sword. She twirled the dragon favor pendant in her hands, considering whether to bring it. She quickly shoved it into the bottom of her bag, then headed downstairs to the throne room. There was now a long table in front of the throne. Amira still looked so small, sitting on such a large seat. The captains and general were seated at the table. Everyone stopped talking when Kalia entered. Kalia, Queen Amira said, smiling widely. She sat up straighter in the chair. Kalia bowed slightly and then approached. How good it is to see you! Are you feeling better? Yes, thank you. Queen Amira, I must tell you something important, if you have a moment. Amira's smile vanished, and she nodded seriously, looking more closely at the pack that Kalia was carrying. I will be traveling to Denlarak today to find out more about the future threat we are facing. Denlarak, of course, the queen said, leaning closer to Kalia and whispering, in all the commotion, I completely forgot. Amira looked around the table. It was apparent that, aside from Hilip, she had not yet told anyone else about Denlarak being a potential threat. Sirs, we have been informed that there is a kingdom on Denlarak intent on attacking us. Captain Scar cleared his throat. Surely the queen is mistaken? She turned her eyes to him sharply. Captain, I am as serious as the dragon that stood behind me on the day my brother died. We have all been misled into believing the planet that sits in the sky is dead, devoid of human life. We must now take precautions. Favor Kalia will go to Denlarak to gather information to help protect us against their inevitable attack. Is that clear? Kalia was surprised by the change in Amira. It was as if the new queen's strength and courage had surpassed her own. General Davin, walk with us, Amira directed. He stood, and the three of them walked out of the throne room and into the sunlight. Once they were on the lawn, Amira turned and wrapped her arms around Kalia, squeezing hard. Do you really have to leave today? Yes, the dragon is waiting to take me. Kalia nodded toward the courtyard where the phantom dragon stood. Wow, Hilip and Amira both said in unison. The three of them stood in quiet awe for a few moments. Queen Amira, are you pretending to be ruthless in front of those men? Kalia asked with a smile, lightening the mood. Amira laughed. It was Hilip's suggestion. He told me to channel the memory of my brothers and father, to act fearless and kind of mean. Well, it is very convincing. I'm proud of you, Amira. Kalia realized just how proud she felt and pulled Amira back into an embrace. Tears filled both of their eyes, and they sniffled as they pulled apart. Please be safe, Kalia, Amira said softly. You have become like a sister to me. You are my sister now, Queen Amira. Remember, there are men from Denlarak already here. They have weapons like the one that killed Prince Bilex. They are acting as spies among us. Do not go off riding alone. I promise you I will not, dear Kalia, she whispered in reply. Are you sure you should go alone? I could go with you, General Hilip said. She looked into his kind, light blue eyes and was comforted by the idea of him being by her side. But she knew that taking him would be selfish. He was the only one she really trusted to keep the new queen safe. No, Hilip, thank you. I feel better with you here, watching out for Amira. I could send some of my men with you, he added. No, I think this is something I need to do alone. She said farewell and gave Amira's hand one last squeeze. Then she turned and walked toward the courtyard where the dragon, Anissa La'alani, waited to take her away. Kalia, wait. Hilip ran up behind her and grabbed her wrist, pulling her to a stop. He spun her around, and she was so close she could smell his sweetness on his breath. Take this with you. He placed a small dagger into her hand, folding her fingers softly over it. Hilip, I have weapons, she said, a smile curling up the corner of her lip. I need you to take something of mine with you. Why? She asked, puzzled, although something stirred inside her, looking into his eyes with his hands gently cradling hers. So you don't forget about me. He smiled, winked, and then turned back around toward the castle. She holstered the small blade and continued walking, but with a lighter air in her step. The green dragon stood proudly, with her wings spread out, looking transparent in the daylight. "I'm here," Kalia said reluctantly as she approached. Since the dragon had dispatched Nicolot so easily, Kalia recognized the danger. And yet, she knew the dragon had only taken that action to save her life. The dragon spirit had been here for thousands of years, and Kalia was confident she had no intention of harming her. She nodded respectfully to Anisalalani. "So, how am I going to travel to Denlarak? Are you going to fly me?" "Through the flames." "What?" "It is painless. Do not fear." Before Kalia could protest, the dragon took in the familiar breath of air, sucking in the air from around her. Kalia found she was breathless to speak, so she shouted at the dragon in her head. "The blue fire? The same fire that killed Nicolot?" The dragon exhaled the blue flames at her, and she felt a prickle of warmth spread along every particle of her skin. The blue flames crawled up her fingers, arms, legs, and torso. Her last thoughts before the flames enveloped her head and took Naldash from view were of Nicolot. Was he still alive? Had the fire only transported him and not killed him? She received no answer as she was consumed. The end. Thank you for listening to my story. I'll keep recording one chapter a week as my busy life allows. If you can't wait to read books 2 and 3 in my trilogy, visit me on Amazon or at tntauthor.com.